Hello everyone. I would like to first of all introduce myself. I am Associate Professor Dr. Didem İşlek, and I am a lecturer in the Nicosia University in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. Today I will mention about my paper which was prepared for Lumen conference, and my paper title is Views and Recommendations on Accessible Museums of the Future. Today, of course, firstly, I will start with a plan of the research. I want to give a short brief on my presentation plan. And firstly, I want to start with introduction and continue aim of the research, the methodology, results, and at the end, my presentation, I will mention discussion, conclusion, and some recommendations for the research. Let's start with introduction. As we know, tourism sector is one of the rapidly developing and growing industries in the whole world, and various policies produced by states in order to ensure the sustainability for the tourism sector. And as a result of this, accessible tourism, especially for people with disabilities, is an important activity implemented within the scope of these policies. It also aims to provide accessible facilities to these individuals, both in accommodation facilities and also in places such as museums. At this point, it should be discussed what is the accessibility to museums. Accessibility to museums means that all individuals in the society can access museums by providing the necessary conditions at equal standards. This point is really crucial, and museums take an important role for individuals with disabilities to socialize easily in society, and museums should be designed with all necessary equipments which can provide the accessibility. In this context, it should be discussed what are the barriers of accessibility in the museums. Digital applications are insufficient. We can give some example in here, virtual realities and virtual tours. And secondly, architectural infrastructure in museums are not designed for disabled people, like ramps, systems, and walking areas. And the third one, there are deficiencies in the audio guide systems for the tour of the museums, and no copies of works that visually impaired individuals can touch, and many technological difficulties experienced in hardware we can come across in the literature as a barriers. And again, when the literature is examined, it's revealed that actually research on accessible museums focus on just the suitability of museums for disabled people, the first topic, and the second topic, disabled people views about the museums, and the third topic is the importance of the museums to make disabled people social. So there has been no research in which the opinions of teacher candidates and lecturers are evaluated on how accessible museums can be or should be. And let's explain this. What is the significance for determining the views about the teacher candidates and lecturers at this point? In order to increase the accessibility to museums, it's thought that it's important to consult the opinions of both teacher candidates who have been trained in museums and museum educations, and lecturers who have taught and experienced in special education. And considering that sample group has been trained and specialized in the special education and disabled people, it's expected that effective results will be achieved within the scope of the research in the creation of the accessible museums for the futures. Yes. And let's see aim of the research of my study. The general aim of the research is to evaluate the accessible museum of feature according to views of teacher candidates and lecturers to make recommendations. And in this direction, answers to the following questions were sought in this study. The first question is, what are the views on the concept of accessible museum? The second one, what are the views on the obstacles to creating accessible museums? And what are the views on accessible museums and technological tools that can be used in education? And what are the recommendations for accessible museums and education? The model of the research, let's see. Let's give some details about this. The research was carried out using the phenomenology model, which is one of the qualitative methods. And the aim of phenomenology, as we know, is to determine the perspective of those who have experienced it. In this study, the first group is teacher candidates, and as we know that before I explained, who have actually have been trained in museum and museum education, and they had experience about this. And the second group is lecturers who taught and specialized in special education and disabled people. So we can say that yes, with this study, we determine the perspective of those who have experienced it according to their views. And participants in the selection of the study group, easily accessible case sampling methods. One of the Forceful sampling methods was used, and total participants are 42. There are 22 pre-service teachers and 20 lecturers who teach in special education department. Data and discriminant analysis, let's give some details about this. Data were collected with a semi-structured interview form. The form consists of 4 questions. Interviews were conducted face-to-face, and about it took 10 minutes. The interviews were recorded, of course, in accordance with the permissions obtained from teacher candidates and lecturers. The descriptive analysis model was used to analyze research data, and data collected within the scope of the research were summarized and interpreted by making direct citation in my text. And let's continue with the results. First results of my research, views on the concept of an accessible museum. We can see from the table as well. Let's give some details about them. The vast majority of the participants associated the concept of accessible museums with the availability of digital infrastructures. And the majority of, again, the participants state that virtual environments are needed for accessible museums. And the participants also had views eliminating the difference in time and space to create an accessible museums, and the appropriate architectural structure in the interior spaces. And they also mentioned that the importance of all individuals in the society having equal access to museums. The second result of my research, the views on barriers to creating accessible museums. We can see from the table again in here. Let's give some details about them. Again, the vast majority of participants state that the most important barriers in creating accessible museums is the insufficient use of digital applications, such as virtual museums and virtual reality. We can see from the photos about virtual reality. And they also emphasize that the architectural designs of the museums are not suitable for the access of people with disabilities. Like we can say ramp, walking areas, and there are again deficiencies in the infrastructures and equipment. We can see again from the photos walking areas and infrastructure and equipment for disabled people. And they also state that the limited number of guide systems for disabled people during museums visits. In addition, the group indicated that cause of the COVID-19 epidemic, lots of people are not intended to visit museum physically. We can see from the photos for either guide systems. And some of the participants state not all museums are located in suitable locations, unfortunately, and their accessibility makes it difficult to access the museums. And third result on my research views on accessible museums and technological tools that can be used for the museum and in education. You can see from the table in here. The majority of participants state that it's important to prefer simulation and virtual reality applications in accessible museums and education. So via these applications, disabled people will enable to visualize and experience parts of museums, such as artworks that they cannot reach easily. We can see from the photo blind people, so he can touch with their hands with virtual reality applications to artworks. And the participants emphasize that touch-operated digital tools are very crucial for disabled individuals to feel and experience the artwork, so they are able to touch works with their sense of sound of touch. And some of the participants again state that the audio guide systems are very important in the promotion of museums, and mobile device, which we can see from the photos as well, will make museums visits more accessible for disabled people. And with mobile device, they can obtain information about the artifacts in museums during their visits. And lastly, the participants emphasize that there should be digital exhibitions that can be created through virtual environments for easy access. Recommendations for accessible museums and its education. We can see again from the table. And according to most participants, it's recommended to use more promotional tools, such as infographics, we can see from the photos, and posters in digital tools. And again, to design architectural design in accordance with the physical characteristic of disabled individuals, they indicated most. And also about the virtual museums, they state that disabled individuals who cannot physically access the museums can access the museums via virtual reality. Especially blind people can touch and feel the art object. We can see from the, again, for virtual reality photos. In addition, the participants again expressed their views on increasing the three-dimensional textile works in the museums should be, and for people with disabled who cannot see the works, reproductions that well represent again similar works can be produced. Thus, individuals can understand what it is and what the works look like by touching it with their hands. We can see from the photos, one of the museum's example. And participants states that there should be content written in Braille alphabet. This is very crucial as well, especially for visual or low vision impaired individuals, where they can learn about the features of artifacts in the museums, and they can see some directions of the museums as well. And training that enable people with disabilities to act according to their needs and learn sign language for people with hearing impairment should be given to museum's personnel. This is very important. And lastly, participants emphasize that training should be organized, explaining which museums have activities for people with disabilities and providing information on practices. And all the findings obtained from the research reveal that pre-service teachers and lecturers have various views on making museums accessible, and their awareness of the importance of this issue is at a sufficient level. And also the literature, there are researches which supports the findings of my study. And my recommendations, it's suggested that necessary conditions should be provided by the state stakeholders in order to make museums accessible to individuals with disabilities. And it's also again recommended to subject experts provide training on accessibility to the Ministry of Tourism and Culture officials and official in museums, archaeological sites and historical places. We can give lots of examples in here, but subject experts are really crucial. Then the permits to given by the state for new museums, providing the necessary conditions for the opening of the museum should become an important, again, necessity and standard for the opening. And virtual realities applications should be expanded for disabled people in order to provide the feeling of touch. And I want to finalize my presentation with a slogan: accessible museums should be expanded. We can see some of the photos from some museums from whole world. Actually, the first one is in Ulrich Museum, touch-based art. They apply this application. And the second one is the color I touch at Istanbul Modern Art. We can see, this is in Turkey, we can see blind students, they can touch with their hands to the artworks reproductions. And the third one is Barilla Alphabet at Milwaukee Public Museums. And the last one that I like it most, Touching Masterpieces exhibition at the National Gallery of Prague. Blind people can touch and can feel the sculptures, all bodies, with their hands. Thank you very much to listen to me. These are